must be exposed to the air and light during several weeks in the summer, and kept continually moist by manual labour. For this purpose meadow land, eligibly situated, was essential. Now a single establishment near Glasgow bleaches 1400 pieces of cotton daily throughout the year. What an enormous capital would be required to purchase land for this purpose! How greatly would it increase the cost of bleaching to pay interest upon this capital, or to hire so much land in England! This expense would scarcely have been felt in Germany. Besides the diminished expense, the cotton stuffs bleached with chlorine suffer less in the hands of skilful workmen than those bleached in the sun, and already the peasantry in some parts of Germany have adopted it, and find it advantageous. Another use to which cheap muriatic acid is applied is the manufacture of glue from bones. Bone contains from 30 to 36% of earthy matter, chiefly phosphate of lime, and the remainder is gelatin. When bones are digested in muriatic acid they become transparent and flexible like leather. The earthy matter is dissolved, and after the acid is all carefully washed away, pieces of glue of the same shape as the bones remain, which are soluble in hot water, and adapted to all the purposes of ordinary glue, without further preparation. Another important application of sulphuric acid may be adduced, namely, to the refining of silver and the separation of gold, which is always present in some proportion in native silver. Silver, as it is usually obtained from mines in Europe, contains in 16 ounces 6 to 8 ounces of copper. When used by the silversmith, or in coining, 16 ounces must contain, in Germany, 13 ounces of silver; in England about 14½ But this alloy is always made artificially by mixing pure silver with the due proportion of the copper; and for this purpose the silver must be obtained pure by the refiner. This he formerly effected by amalgamation, or by roasting it with lead, and the cost of this process was about £2 for every hundredweight of silver. In the silver so prepared about 1/1200 to 1/2000th part of gold remained. To effect the separation of this by nitrio hydrochloric acid was more expensive than the value of the gold. It was therefore left in utensils, or circulated in coin, valueless. The copper, too, of the native silver was no use whatever; but the 1000th part of gold, being about 1½ of the value of the silver, now covers the cost of refining, and affords an adequate profit to the refiner, so that he effects the separation of the copper, and returns to his employer the whole amount of the pure silver as well as the copper, without demanding any payment. He is amply remunerated by that minute portion of gold. The new process of refining is a most beautiful chemical operation. The granulated metal is boiled in concentrated sulphuric acid, which dissolves both the silver and the copper, leaving the gold nearly pure in the form of a black powder. The solution is then placed in a leaden vessel containing metallic copper. This is gradually dissolved, and the silver precipitated in a pure metallic state. The sulphate of copper thus formed is also a valuable product, being employed in the manufacture of green and blue pigments. Other immediate results of the economical production of sulphuric acid are the general employment of phosphorus matches, and of stearine candles, that beautiful substitute for tallow and wax. 25 years ago the present prices and extensive applications of sulphuric and muriatic acids, of soda, phosphorus, etc., would have been considered utterly impossible. Who is able to foresee what new and unthought of chemical productions, ministering to the service and comforts of mankind, the next 25 years may produce? After these remarks you will perceive that it is no exaggeration to say we may fairly judge of the commercial prosperity of a country from the amount of sulphuric acid it consumes. Reflecting upon the important influence which the price of sulphur exercises upon the cost of production of bleached and printed cotton stuffs, soap, glass, etc., and remembering that Great Britain supplies America, Spain, Portugal, and the East with these, exchanging them for raw cotton, silk, wine, raisins, indigo, etc., etc., we can understand why the English government should have resolved to resort to war with Naples in order to abolish the sulphur monopoly which the latter power attempted recently to establish. Nothing could be more opposed to the true interests of Sicily than such a monopoly. Indeed, had it been maintained a few years, it is highly probable that sulphur, the source of her wealth, would have been rendered perfectly valueless to her. Science and industry form a power to which it is dangerous to present impediments. It was not difficult to perceive that the issue would be the entire cessation of the exportation of sulphur from Sicily. In the short period the sulphur monopoly lasted, 15 patents were taken out for methods to obtain back the sulphuric acid used in making soda. Admitting that these 15 experiments were not perfectly successful, there can be no doubt it would ere long have been accomplished. But then in gypsum, sulphate of lime, and in heavy spar, sulphate of barytes, we possess mountains of sulphuric acid. In galena, sulphate of lead, and in iron pyrites, we have no less abundance of sulphur. The problem is how to separate the sulphuric acid or the sulphur from these native stores. Hundreds of thousands of pounds weight of sulphuric acid were prepared from iron pyrites, while the high price of sulphur consequent upon the monopoly lasted. We should probably ere long have triumphed over all difficulties and have separated it from gypsum. The impulse has been given, the possibility of the process proved, and it may happen in a few years that the inconsiderate financial speculation of Naples may deprive her of that lucrative commerce. In like manner, Russia, by her prohibitory system, has lost much of her trade in tallow and potash. One country purchases only from absolute necessity from another which excludes her own productions from her markets. Instead of the tallow and linseed oil of Russia, Great Britain now uses palm oil and coconut oil of other countries. Precisely analogous is the combination of workmen against their employers, which has led to the construction of many admirable machines for superseding manual labour. In commerce and industry every imprudence carries with it its own punishment. Every oppression immediately and sensibly recoils upon the head of those from whom it emanates. Section 3.